Welcome back to the programme, and my guests are Paddy Coffey of Finnegan, Ms. Ryan of Labour, Sinn Féin's David Cumnan, Independent candidate John Halligan, Independent candidate Joe Conway, Ben Nutty of Fisnua, Joe Tobe of the Workers' Party, and Jerry Kearsey, who is an independent candidate. And our next question comes from the president of the student union and of Young Fine Gael, beg your pardon, at the WIT. In fact, he's the president of the WIT Political Society, Kevin O'Sullivan.
How you doing? I just had a question to the panel. It was mentioned earlier on about university status for the South East and WIT. It's a very important issue, and I'd like to ask the panel what are their views if they were elected into government, and what they would do for university, not just for the South East, because that's all we're hearing is, oh yes, we'll give South East the university, we'll trigger the process, etc. But I'd like a kind of a direct answer from the various candidates. What will they do if elected into government to ensure that WIT and the South East is given the university that it deserves and that it needs to help us economically here in the South East?
The first thing I think that should happen is that when the election is over, whichever TDs are elected, those four people should work together immediately to put pressure on the incoming government, because we've been given far too many false promises by previous governments, far too many hurdles put in the way, far too many impediments, and so are far too many pups. The reason why we need a university, not just for Waterford or for the South East, is jobs, research and development. The South East and Waterford has been operating with one hand tied behind its back. And I would make this point: we should not accept second-class status or a second-class tier for the people of this region. We deserve a university the same as any other region in this state, because it brings finance, it brings autonomy, and it brings branding. We can brand the region as a university region and this city as a university city.
Okay, Joe Tobe of the Workers' Party.
Thanks, Billy. First of all, Billy, a university for the South East would be cost neutral. Because if we were elevated to university, we would automatically get international funding. And to date, in the last 10 years, WIT have received 70 million in international funding. To date, you have a team out there, and they're into macular degeneration, which has to do with the back of the eye. And they have to date, they have got 20 million euros for that, for their research and development. So it's essential that we, for the South East and Waterford, get what we deserve. Like everybody else has a university. Why not Waterford? Because the big people up there in the universities won't allow us. That's the bottom line of it.
Okay, thank you,
what
Joe.
We're saying is,
briefly,
just
yeah.
Well, we have to get a university. It's essential for jobs. There's 10,000 people, students out in the WIT. There's 1,000 people employed out there. We could triple that if we got our what we deserve.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Our next quick question comes from Maurice O'Connor of the Waterford branch of the Carers Association. Maurice.
Good morning, panel. A good government looks after the more marginalised members of society. In view of the fact that carers save the state approximately 2.5 billion per annum, in fact they're the only group that save the government anything when we look at all the expenses that politicians make and all the quangos that are there. This is a group of people that actually save money to the state. And they're the only social welfare group that have to work for their allowance. They're the group that have suffered reductions in home help and support payments.
We appreciate that. Can we have the question?
And the question is, what would you do if you got into government for carers?
Okay, we take Joe Conway.
I think the first and the most outstanding sign of the good faith of an incoming government would be to publish without delay the National Carers Strategy, which we have brought up at our local authorities, and we've tried to urge the governments to do this, so that the people who are caring for the less well-off and the more vulnerable in society would have a charter, a bill of rights, and an indication into which way the government was going to invest its resources. And I'm just looking at some figures there. We have 11,500 people in the constituency, 65 or over. And that is a huge constituency. It's a quota from electoral terms. And those people and their carers, they deserve to have that Bill of Rights, that strategy, so that we can take it forward and stop penalising the people who are saving the country so much money and who are doing such wonderful work. For
John Halligan.
I think the cruelest cut of all was in the last budget where they cut the carers allowance and cut carers disability. When you consider that they're working for a minimum wage and working 24 hours a day. And why it was done and why it was cruelly done was quite simply that a carer cannot say to their mother and father, no matter how much you cut my wages, I'm not going to look after you. And that's why they've done it. They knew that the carers would not be able to protest, they would not be able to go on strike, they would not be able to fight against the cuts. I thought it was the cruelest cut that was foisted upon any members of the community. We are implying, and it's already been stated, we are saving hundreds of millions of euro every year by volunteers. Volunteers paid despicable wages. Volunteers paid despicable wages to work 24 hours a day. It doesn't make economic sense, and I think it's a horrifying thought to think that none of the main parties down to the years, particularly Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, have addressed the issue of carers. They've spoke very plainly about it. They've spoken about what they will do and what they should do. Carers have been treated like this through successive governments, and I know my own sister is a carer for the past 30 years.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Now a question from Chris Anderson of South East Simon. Okay.
Hi. Sorry. I'd like to ask the political candidates, and particularly Joe Conway. You talked, Joe, tonight about knocking on people's doors and going to people's homes. And Simon communities across Ireland and South East Simon community work with people that often have no doors because they have no homes.
Okay, and the question is, Chris.
And the question is, what plan do the political parties and candidates have to tackle the issue of homelessness in the South East and in Ireland?
Okay, I know you dragged that at Joe, but Joe answered the last one, so can I bring in another candidate if you don't mind? And we'll have Seamus Ryan, please.
Thank you very much, Billy, and thank you, Chris. The first thing to say is that I've been chairperson of the Housing Committee in Waterford City Council for the last number of years, and we were a signatory, and I have been one of the first signatories of elected representatives here to the Make Room campaign, which is a campaign that, as you're quite aware of, Chris, to end homelessness by 2010. Now that didn't happen. So that campaign needs to be renewed, and the Labour Party are committed to renewing that campaign and to putting the resources into ending homelessness. Homelessness is not just about putting a roof over somebody's head. If that ended homelessness, it would be ended long ago. It's about putting in the support services, because there's issues such as addiction, there's all sorts of issues there, and that's where the resources need to be put in. We can't just concentrate on the provision of bricks and mortar. It's more than that. And we can't be cutting services to homeless people and to the organisations that look after the homeless and then expect an end to homelessness. It's not going to work like that.
Can we have David, please, David?
In a republic, I believe that people have rights. And one of those rights, in my view, is a fundamental right to a home. And we have far too many people in this country who are homeless. We have far too many people who are waiting on housing waiting lists. And we now have a new emerging crisis in this country of people who can't afford to pay their mortgages. And those people are faced the very real prospect of losing their homes at a time when we, as taxpayers, have put tens of billions of euro into banks, and yet those banks are now going to force a lot of those people to give up their homes. What we need to do, in my view, is to have enshrined in the Constitution a constitutional right to a house, which is what people should have. People, in a republic, people have rights, and it is the responsibility of government to vindicate those rights.
Okay.
First of all, Fine Gael want to work with all of the NGOs, the likes of the Simon Community, Focus Ireland, the local authorities, the health and the social services, to try and adopt a coordinated policy, a cross-cutting policy that will address all of the issues of homelessness. It's not just about providing the house, because local authorities, where there is an emergency, will provide accommodation. But the problem is we're not getting to the root cause, which is the social, sometimes mental health issues, and sometimes addiction issues. Unless we get a cross-cutting, coordinating policy, we want to revise our homeless strategy to introduce a more efficient system to deliver the services. And like we can all talk about delivering services, and I said this at the start of the programme, unless we find the savings elsewhere, we won't have the money to deliver the services on the front line for the likes of the homeless and those people that need it.
And that's where we have to leave it. I'm terribly sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but that's it for today. Thank you to the audience for coming in. Thank you at home who supplied questions. Our apologies, we couldn't get around to them all. But please, can we have a round of applause for our panel today? Wally Coffey, Seamus Ryan, Jim tomorrow afternoon at the same time. He's recording his session along these lines tonight at the Town Hall Theatre in Dungar. Thanks for coming.